Hey everybody, this is the second attempt on the same day to get this video right. First time I forgot to record, that was a couple weeks ago, and then I tried to do it again today, which worked out perfectly, but I didn't have any audio. So now I do have audio, and I do have video signal, so I'm going to go through this one more time. And so right now we're doing 1001 I Am Machine Vegan. This is 1001 video games you must play before you die, part 2. Rerun. Technically 2-4, because it's part 2 the 4th time. But it's about Pong. And we're going to go ahead and read the excerpt here. Pong, original release date, 1972. Platform, various. Developer, Atari. Genre, sports. According to legend, shortly after the first Pong prototype was installed at Andy Capp's Tavern in Sunnyvale, California, Atari received a phone call from the bar's owner who complained that the machine had broken. The engineer who'd built the game, Al Alcorn, drove to the pub to take a look. He found that the hardware was working just fine. The problem was an unexpected one. Patrons had fed so many quarters into the coin slot that the machine could take no more. An industry had been born. Pong conquered bars and arcades and eventually living rooms too, with a dedicated home version. A game whose instructions can be summed up in one sentence: avoid missing ball for high score. It is easy for anybody to pick up and immediately understand. Players control 1 or 2 rectangular paddles along either side of the screen, trying to prevent the ball from escaping their side of the playing field, and sneak it past their opponent's paddle on the other. As an electronic version of table tennis, Pong is simple and intuitive. Its lineage as a pub game is obvious. The rules are hardly different from those of foosball. Pong also demonstrates a subtle and important lesson of good game design, still applicable today, which is that the little things matter. Depending on where the ball strikes in paddle, players can give it English, changing the angle of the trajectory to keep opponents off balance. Pong's other unheralded accomplishment is its creation of credible artificial intelligence. Though playing against a human component is preferable, Pong's computer-controlled second player is a worthy substitute. Good without being great, it's capable both of great saves and boneheaded mistakes. Though, unlike Andy Capp's customers, it's still on top of its game at last call. And so, Pong, the first excerpt I want to note concerning it being full of quarters, that was later confirmed to have been done on purpose. They did it so that it would inspire interest, like, whoa, that game's so popular, it's full of quarters. But they did it on purpose. And it makes sense. It's almost like a type of, it's just marketing. It's just marketing. And so today we're using ponggame.org in order to go ahead and play Pong. I don't have an Atari 2600, and I don't have any of the Pong clone consoles, but it would be something that I would love to do eventually. So here we have ponggame.org. I'm going to select one player. We're going to use the keyboard. We're going to start off on easy just to show how the game goes. And so as you can see here, you have gameplay. Pong is very easy, very straightforward. You have a center line. You have paddles that you manipulate with. In this case, we're using the up and down arrow keys, but in the original versions of the game, I believe the arcade one had joysticks, although in original iteration, I have no idea, honestly. It might have had the trackball, but as far I do know that in the home version of the Atari 2600, they came with potentiometer dials, and those dials you moved up and down, or left and right, to make your paddle go up and down. And so this is as close as I'm going to be able to get to that. I have a fire alarm going off, so give me 1 second. Crisis averted. So, where was I? You played with potentiometers. You played with little controllers. It's really cool, really easy, really simple. And the biggest takeaway, that, in my opinion, of Pong is not necessarily that Pong is the best game in the history of video games ever, because it's not. It sucks. You know, if you were born at a time in which you've actually played decently well these newer consoles, and you didn't start with Pong, it's like, you know, going backwards, which it's totally valid, and I think a lot of people don't consider that as an option. It's totally valid to say, you know, I think Pong is boring. Because if they neither grow up with Pong nor have any interest in particularly video game history or video game hardware, then it makes complete sense that they would, you know, be like, you know, Pong isn't worth their time. And that's fine. There are some people who have not watched The Last Samurai. There are some people who have not watched, you know, cowboy movies with John Wayne. There are some people who do not know who the Tofu Cafe. I can't remember the name. The name of the anime. You know, the 90s. There are people who don't know those things, and they don't care. Their lives are fine. But that's kind of a goal of mine in this series, to show people why these are important. You know, especially because you're just playing Pong right now. I want to give commentary as to why Pong was important. And so if you can imagine yourself in a pre-digital era, the idea of a home console is completely alien to you. It's a completely new experience. You might not even have a TV, and if you have a television, you know, if you're poor, it likely is black and white. And if you happen to have the money, you've got yourself a color television, and you have 3 or 4 channels to choose from. And at night, when there's nothing on TV, they aren't playing anything. It is just off the air. That is a wild concept to me, but nothing is on. And so you have Pong coming into play, which is a device you plug into your TV. And for a long time, as far as I know, for the hardware goes, they used RF modulation, so they had a little adapter. And this is something some people might be familiar with if they had a Super Nintendo, because the Super Nintendo, I believe, had composite out. But for me, at least, I always used the RF modulator that came with it, or the RF adapter, I should say, that came with it, so you could play, and you'd have to fiddle and diddle in it and everything, because it didn't ever actually work correctly. So you had to have this really groundbreaking piece of hardware, and today rudimentary, but then groundbreaking piece of hardware that would work. You decided that you wanted to play your friends down the block, you decided you wanted to play with your parents, you decided you wanted to play with your siblings, and I don't know if on the original version of Pong on the arcade cabinet, and I'm sure it actually might have been there, that they had the AI, you know, some sort of form of artificial intelligence that beep booped and would play against you, so you didn't have to play with another player. You could get a high score. You could leave your name, your mark on the local arcade, on the local movie theater, on the local wherever they had a particular game cabinet, so you could click, 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 and then at the end when you want to enter your name into the memory so that everybody knows that you are the Pong champion. You were the person who put the time and effort into something like this. And so I think Pong is a really important part of video game history. I do think that there has to exist, and if it doesn't, I would love if I had the capacity to do it, but build as close to analog and as close to specific item device kit that you could build yourself a Pong kit. And as far as I understand, for the most part, it's kind of rudimentary, especially now that we have things like Raspberry Pis and RetroPie kind of architecture and OSs and everything that you could do this. But I'd really like to see something almost, I would like to see it solderless just because it makes it easier. But down to making your own board. There are people who make, you know, easy bake oven stuff. There are people who make cheesecake with their kids. I want to see people making PC boards with their kids, drawing on the paths, you know, have like a coloring book to where they draw the paths on, they bake the board, and then they drop each connector in. You know, they drop each transistor, capacitor, pot, things here and there in as simplified as possible, because it can be intimidating to try to do any of that. But I think that type of instruction would definitely help set people up for a future where they could go into a field of repair or work, or just really even as just a hobby. I don't care. As just a hobby, as an ability, so that you can show people that you enjoy and you like this. And I think it's wild. I think it's amazing, and I think it's very important, very cool. The right to repair and all that. And I love seeing when people repair their blenders at home and repair their televisions. They go on eBay. We had a TV go out at work, and we were like, oh, you know, we don't have the time to repair it, and the cost for us to call a repair person is almost equivalent to the cost of a replacement TV, because TVs are very cheap, and it just watches security cameras all day, so it doesn't need to be anything special. And so we bought an Insignia, and then one of the employees was like, hey, you know, can I have it? I'll fix it. And I said, sure, I don't care, whatever, man. It's just, you know, gonna just be scrap. And he went on eBay, and he bought the LED. He didn't buy the LED panels. He bought, or the LEDs, you know, pieces. He bought a something that I can't remember what it was right now. But he went on eBay, and I think it was $30, $40. He cracked the TV open. He replaced the actual film that was in there that was damaged, and turned it on, and it worked. And it worked. And it worked. And I thought that was so amazing, because not only is it just, you know, cool just for cool's sake, but it's also, you know, saving and withholding and making sure, you know, we don't waste and do these things. So if you have the option to build your own little video game like this, and as rudimentary and as simple and as some people might say boring, if you have the ability to create a real piece of technology, you can then turn around and then become creative. And for those, honestly, who are not creative, they are an artist, they do not make, you know, they can't think of a pattern on, that's fine. That's fine. Because not every person on a production team needs to be the creative. There are positions and areas of expertise that is needed. You need to be, I need support. I need challenges. I need changes. I need someone to support and build these things. I need someone to check the code for bugs. You don't have to be the creative person in that individual, but you can be the individual. Not every builder has to have the vision of what their remodeled house is going to look like. That is what an architect is for, or that is what a designer is for, and then you can make it a reality. You can turn around and you can take someone's idea and you can say, I'd like to work together with you to make an idea like this. So you have a basis. You go, I've made, you know, Pong. There used to be, and it was something I mentioned on my previously recorded, but no audio video. When Radio Shack went bankrupt, they were carrying these maker kits, and they were $100. And at the time, this was the last day, and it was 90% off. From Radio Shack. It was 90% off for anything. And so I bought the maker kits for $10. And they had batteries, and they had a companion book you could buy, and it had wiring, and it had a breadboard. And the companion book took you experiment by experiment and taught you these hands-on ideas of power, modulation, controls, etc., etc. And it started from the very basic of how LEDs work, how 12-volt works, how transformers work, etc. And it moved you all the way up to logic. It led you all the way up to logic, basic logic, but logic, where you could actually have a device that did things. You put inputs and it put outputs. And so I have all 3 kits that I purchased. I have them here, and they're incredibly informative. They're incredibly fun. And once you start getting into stuff like that, you kind of start to realize why people collect old computers and old computer components, and why people go to ham radio meets, because ham radio in its whole self is a hobby, because people love not only being able to communicate without the needs for kind of a I'm going to say a large infrastructure, because you do need an infrastructure for ham radio to work, but you're able to communicate without the need for cell phones and without these satellites and without the need for X, Y, and Z. It's as simple as basically how powerful your transceiver is, and maybe repeaters, and how willing you are to go ahead and really learn how to modulate frequencies and capture things and learn Morse code and kind of do all those things. Those things are important, call signs and all those things. So again, I think that's super duper important. When it comes to Pong, Pong's really easy. It's some paddles, and it sets up video games as a legitimate leisure and business. And even though Atari does not exist today, and even though we had the video game crash, and even though we had the loss of a lot of things, it's still relevant, it's still important, and it still is it was a fun game. It's a fun game to play. Even today, it's a fun game to play. So this was a short one. It's Pong. Like, subscribe, follow, send me a message, leave me a comment. I love talking to everybody. And I hope to continue doing this series. Thank you guys. Thank you for everything.